Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Mike, what do you think the biggest thing is that you've learned since you've been investing in rental properties?
You know, I would say the biggest lesson is when I began, I started looking at cash flow as my main indicator of whether I wanted to invest in a property or not. Over time here, I've become more focused on appreciation and its benefits.
Mike tried investing for cash flow, and it never quite gave him the returns that he was looking for. However, investing for appreciation has made him a lot of money. So on the show today, we're going to see if we can figure out what went wrong when he tried investing for cash flow, and we'll see how he's made so much money investing for appreciation. Joining us on the show today from Denver is Mike Wilkinson. We'll take a really quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Mike. When you're buying a rental property, you can't do everything on your own. It's really important to have a team of people to help you. And in my opinion, the most important person to have on your team is a really good lender. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. Chaley is a nationwide lender, and she's also an experienced investor herself, and she understands the needs of both brand new and experienced investors, and she can help you find the best loan for you in your situation. Right now, Chaley has a special limited time offer just for our listeners. If you mention that you heard this ad on the Rental Income Podcast, Chaley will credit you back $250 at the closing for your property. If you want to get more details, or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, or maybe have her look at a deal that you're looking at, you can reach out to Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. We're all investing in rental properties to make money, but you don't want to make money and then turn around and give it all right back to the government. The best way to maximize the money you keep is by lowering your taxes. And you want to make sure you're working with a CPA that really understands the complexity of how real estate taxes work. I'd recommend that you reach out to the investorfriendlycpa.com. You may remember Assis. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. He's a real estate investor, and he does more than just prepare your taxes. He'll strategize with you, he'll set up a tax plan, and he'll make sure that you get every single deduction that you're legally entitled to. If you want to learn more, reach out to Assis at investorfriendlycpa.com. That's investorfriendlycpa.com.
Rental Income Podcast.
We've been in a market where for the last 10 years, prices have gone up. I mean, if you bought anything 10 years ago, you've made a lot of money today. If the world had turned out differently and maybe prices had gone down for the last 10 years, do you think you would still feel the same way? Or do you think you would maybe feel defeated that you bought these properties that are worth less?
Yeah, you know, I think that we all look like geniuses in a heavy growth growth market, right? And it's really important to keep that in mind. Seeing 10 years in a row of decline, I'm not sure if it's ever happened.
It hasn't, and it probably never will. But like, just hypothetically.
But yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think that if we were in a different time, it's important to keep that in mind. Something that I like to do is kind of look back over time too, and over some different markets. I think if we were to go and look back at, California, some of their better markets, we said, okay, 2006, 2007, you paid for something, whether it's in the Bay Area or in San Diego, and 2 years later, you would have thought you were an idiot. And then 2 or 3 years after that, you would have thought you were a genius.
Right.
And then 2 or 3 years after that, you tripled your money. at least if it was leveraged, maybe you did better than that. So, I think that it doesn't really change the fact that if I were helping someone in their 20s or 30s or providing advice, I don't think it really changes. I have a interesting kind of perspective where, if I purchased a place back in July, where I don't think we could sell it at the same price today. But it's in a market that I still really believe in. And I'm happy that has been the trajectory of that market. If the ideal situation is I buy and that market comes down a little bit more, and I get the opportunity to buy again. And luckily I am in that financial position to be able to purchase again. But I think it's smart as an investor to stay, just like you want to be a little bit emotionally removed in a typical rental cash flow type of situation. You need to be a little bit emotionally removed in an appreciation situation as well.
Well, let's talk about what you've done. So how did you get started buying rentals?
Sure. I actually graduated school in a town in Durango, Colorado, where it's more of a vacation, really beautiful place. And started thinking, okay, this whole house hacking type of situation would be great. I have a lot of friends and roommates. And, at that time, I was able to basically live for free. That's a little bit more difficult today, but that was how I got started.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, house hacking is a great way to go. So I'm assuming that property appreciated?
It did. Yep. Between both kind of a forced appreciation of fixing it up and appealing to the modern buyer, as well as the market appreciating. Yep.
Okay, so how much do you think you made on that property?
After, I held it for a few years. I made, I would say, about 50K on that one.
Awesome.
And, that is after the 2-year mark. So that's 50K free of capital gains taxes.
Yeah, that's really a great gift that we get as part of the tax code, that if you live in the property for at least 2 years, when you sell the property, it's tax free. So like that's a huge chunk of change to come into when you're pretty young. So then what did you do from there?
Yeah, so I had executed a couple of good flip deals. I recruited a friend who has a lot of handyman experience to come and take this on with me and live with me. Through 5-6 months of the project, I cut him in on a little bit of the profit, and even after that, still ended up making some $85,000 or something like that on the project. So that was a good one, and kind of my first experience with just a strict flip. And then I also had another one that I planned to be a rental property and set up that way. And after all of my renovations and dealing with the city, the market continued to chug upwards, and that one also turned out to be a 50K plus profit. So
That's pretty awesome. So you come out of school, you do the house hack, you do a couple of flips, you come into a good amount of money. So now you've got some cash. You've got a great nest egg. So then how did you take that money, and I guess, like, what did you do from there?
I purchased some properties out in the Cincinnati area, actually. I had a roommate and good friend from college who his wife is from there, and he moved out there with her. I quickly was looking into the market and saying, man, I could purchase a property for this and rent it for purchasing properties for a fifth of the price and renting them for half the price of here sounded pretty awesome. So I went and invested in one single family home and one triplex out there. And I held those for a good few years, 3.5 years.
So, I'm assuming that you were buying in Cincinnati for cash flow, right? Like that's
exactly.
So why the change? Like what was your thinking back then that you had had some good hits, you had made some good money in Denver. Like what made you think that maybe cash flow was a better way to go?
Yeah, it was early on, and I bought into, a lot of the rah of, well, let's go and find, the closest thing to 2% rule, or let's go and find, the very most cash flow possible, and thinking, okay, well, if I kept on this trajectory, a couple flips, buy a couple properties, in the next 10 years, maybe I could be, without needing to really support myself income wise. And yeah, I guess that was kind of where my perspective was at that point.
So what did you buy? Like what kind of, like, I guess like, let's start with the neighborhoods. Like what was the neighborhood like?
I would call these neighborhoods C class for both properties. The single family was the first that I purchased. Home was in decent shape. I got a new roof with the purchase and inherited a tenant and a decent tenant. And that was a $50,000 purchase. Rents didn't grow all that much over time, but, right out of the get-go, $50,000 purchase and about $1,000 a month in rent.
Did you buy those properties with cash?
I did.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you've got fairly low overhead. I mean, you're paying your property manager, you've got taxes, you've got insurance. Now, with the properties meeting the 2% rule, but then having high expenses for repairs, did the properties make any money?
They did. They did make some money, but in the grand scheme of things, it just wasn't all that much, and it wasn't enough to justify that amount of cash sitting out there. And I think that on year 2, and especially going into year 3, I really started to feel that way,
right,
and understand that.
Now, I'm just wondering here, like, do you think the problem with those properties was that they weren't good properties, or, maybe you didn't have the right management? Or do you think it was that maybe you didn't have enough, that if you had, say, 10 properties, you would have had more revenue, and maybe, if you had taken on mortgages and used that your $100,000 as down payments, maybe you would have had more revenue and maybe things would have worked out better? Or do you think it just wasn't a good situation?
I think it was the out of market situation to a certain degree, but I think more specifically, it was the market that I decided to invest in at that stage of my rental investing that just didn't make very much sense. I think that that more than anything, and when I kind of came to that realization for myself, it's almost like talking on the phone here with you. I'm almost glad that I had some cockroaches in the units, and some, as in actual cockroaches, mitigating them with multiple times, paying for that, having tenants who we had to turn over, and different problems like that got me frustrated enough to completely change my strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm almost glad for that.
Okay. Wow. So when you sold those properties, did you make any money on the sale, or did you just kind of get out and break even?
No, combined with the money, let's say over those few years, I made, 15 grand or so on the on the rental side of it, and just putting away some money and actually making some profit. On the other side, appreciation wise, those were solid years, going from beginning of 2018 to beginning of 21 or middle of 21. But in that market, and in those neighborhoods, it just didn't reflect it nearly as much as it should have. And so I would say 40K or so. I think it was right around 40K on the appreciation side, and then you add in some of those rental gains, which, I would say it would only be somewhere in that 10 to 15K range over that period because of expenses.
Now, if you compared that to what you would have made if you had maybe used the money to buy a property in Denver, again, with those being good years, how much do you think you would have made if you had not bought those properties in Cincinnati and bought something locally?
Yeah, I don't like to think about that too much. But, honestly, it is the reason why I decided to sell out there. Is I sat here and I said, man, what I have foregone by just buying one $500,000 house with a 25% down payment or 20% down payment. I probably, rather than turning my 100K into 150K, I probably would have turned my 100K into maybe 350K or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's almost not a fair comparison. I mean, because if you had bought something locally, it would have been a down payment, and
exactly,
but still, I mean, you would have made a lot more money if you had just bought something locally. But it is what it is. So you learned from that experience. You moved on, and so did that experience turn you off from ever investing for cash flow? Like, do you think at some point, maybe later in life, you would buy something for cash flow, or having been through that, that's just not something you would ever consider again?
Oh no, absolutely. I will be investing for cash flow, throughout my life, and probably weighted more toward the time when I actually would be looking to pull on some monthly help financially, to not need to work as much in my day job. But I'm a person who likes working. I'm not, nothing against rock climbers, but I'm not getting a Sprinter van and living out of it for a few years and, climbing the different parts around. That's not my kind of goal or where I'm at. So, at some point here, and actually, I'm sitting on some cash now, and, what I'm looking for a couple of projects, and one of those, the intention is going to be a buy and hold, and with the goal of some cash flow. So it's not that I hate the idea or anything beyond, anything along those lines, but I do think there's an important there needs to be important attention paid to, all right, what is my goal? Is it growing my net worth and my equity? Or do I actually need to pull on, monthly cash flow and use that?
Now, let me ask you, there's one other great appreciation hit that you had. And I think this is a great story. So you bought a property that you used as an Airbnb. Tell me about this property.
Yeah, just a gorgeous place. It's right across from Rudai Reservoir. Beautiful area up there, close to all kinds of activities of fly fishing and biking and water skiing, and close to the Aspen Mountains for skiing. So We purchased it at $660K after a concession. Took on a septic leach field type of situation that needed to be addressed at some point, that other people weren't willing to take on. So got a decent price on it. And yeah, proved out this short-term rental property situation, which was our first time being short-term rental property owners and managers.
So you own that house for only about a year, right?
Yeah, so July, August, and then we sold it. Went to market maybe September, sold it in October. So maybe 14 months or so.
And then when you sold it, how much profit did you make on that property?
Yeah, so we bought at 660. We sold at about 850 or 855. Wow. So it was great, and especially in a time where that was after rates had already gone back up, and other areas like Denver, we'd already seen the kind of taper off and head down a little bit in our prices, but they don't have the inventory for that adjustment, and so it stayed quite high during that time, and it was a blessing. So the profit after all those costs of selling and all of that was probably around 170K or so.
I mean, that's really, really awesome. But it's like that house wouldn't have been possible if you didn't do everything that led up to that. If you didn't do the flips, if you didn't do the house hack, if you hadn't have bought in Cincinnati, it's like that made it all possible. And I think that's really awesome and really inspiring to see that you can get that kind of return in 14 months. I mean, that's really awesome. Congratulations.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And, part of that is also, we were proving out a rental strategy where, the income from it on a monthly basis, short term, was blowing us away. And it was just a desirable spot. So over 12 months, year over year, we proved out about 115K or about 10K a month of income, or I should say of revenue, which maybe 50 to 60% of that was income. So in a time where, especially with rates going up, not many people could find decent investments, we were able to present something where self-managed, I think we were looking at like 17% cash on cash at a 850K asking price, which was very attractive for many people at that time. So,
like, why didn't you keep it? I mean, that property is so profitable, and I understand it's got to be tempting to not sell it and to get that big hit. But it sounds like on a cash flow basis, you were doing really well.
Yeah, that is true. And, in the big picture, we still believed in the area, et cetera. But, I guess one of the things was my wife and I were about ready to be done. We didn't use the property very much ourselves. And we were about ready to be done being the short-term managers. I guess knowing the profit that we would make, we felt it was the right time for us. So have our eye on some other areas, and this is kind of part of what my strategy looks like, which is, okay, now we sell this one and we'll be able to buy two more. And, part of that is what I learned in Cincinnati, which is, let's make this equity go and work for us, and let's leverage in a safe way. But let's leverage, and let's take, rather than just sitting on a ton of equity up there, let's take that and buy two or three more, and watch those do well. So
I love it. I mean, that really shows the power of appreciation. And the great thing with appreciation is you don't always see it coming. A lot of times it comes out of the blue and it can happen very rapidly. And that's exactly what's happened here in the last couple of years. And I think it's great that Mike has done so well with his rentals. If anybody is interested in connecting with Mike, or if you're interested in investing in the Denver area, Mike is a full-time realtor. He works with a lot of investors, and he would be happy to connect with you. I've got his contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 411. I'd like to thank today's sponsor for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. Chaley is a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs. She has ARMs. She has interest-only mortgages. Of course, she's got 30-year fixed. She can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more, or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. I put out a new interview every single Tuesday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to the show, and you will get notified as soon as the next episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.